Hello everybody, this is Megan aka Thecowlawyer, and welcome back to another video. Today, to celebrate Valentine's Day, I wanted to draw Cupid, and that is as far as that idea went. For this one, I wanted to have colored line art, so I have a bunch of these Micron color pens, and usually what I'll do is I have a pre-plan of what my color palette's going to be, where I want the colors placed, and I will use that to determine which color pens I want to use so everything's lining up the way that it needs to. In this case, it was a lot of pinks, red, I had gray in there, and like purple for some subtle shading, but overall pinks and reds, because you know, Valentine's, right? So usually what I'll do is once I know where the colors are going to go, if I want to indicate a little bit more shadows, I'll take a darker color and then just line that over on top of the line art I initially do, and that way it gives it a nice effect to it, but also helps separate them, especially when I'm going to add shadows. And something I did not think about, which will come up later, is that for the hair, I knew that I wanted it to be red. I didn't think, however, if I chose a red for the hair that was close enough to the red Micron pen that I was using, it would essentially like vanish any of the lines that I was working on. So that's fun, and had to really switch up my strategy for that. When I go about laying down like the Micron pens, I will do one of two things. First of all, I will either have my light box out and then just directly do the line art from there, or at least get a preliminary line out, because I can always go back in later and thicken up lines where I want them to be, and that is probably the easiest method to do. However, another method that I'll use is what I'm using in this video. I will erase chunks and then do the line art on top of that, so that way, like, especially with the gray, yellows, and lighter colors, if you don't erase it, you get that like lining in. So in this case, I figured, I was like, okay, well, if I use my 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil, surely the lines will be light enough and thin enough that if I did have any overlap, it's not going to be so in your face. And I missed a chunk on the wing when I was erasing the pencils, and I figured the gray would be fine if it went over it. It stuck out like a sore thumb. Overall, it was fun because gray on top of gray, and I was able to disguise that with some of the colors later. But that is something to keep in mind if you're ever using them, and someday, you know, well, maybe I'll be better with it. Okay, so now one thing I would say when it comes to microns, they're amazing as much as they are annoying. Especially with like the markers that I use, if I don't let it dry fully, and usually I give it about like 30 minutes or so, once I'm completely done with the picture, the markers will reactivate it or find that one little section that isn't completely dry and smear it across the page. So with these, I will usually give it some drying time, but as I'm even using the pens themselves, I'll put down a piece of paper to help kind of block any smudging that my hand's gonna do. And especially with the purple, that pen was super juicy and it just left huge chunks of ink that was gonna be a problem. Overall, always test your line art or whatever you're going to use for your line art with any materials that you're going to do, so that way you can see whether or not there's any adverse effects before, so that way you can kind of plan for it ahead of time and then you don't have to worry as much. Alright, as I mentioned before, I wanted to do a minimum color palette keeping with your typical Valentine's Day colors, so ended up with mainly sticking with reds, pinks, and white, more or less for reds and pinks, and I had everything picked up beforehand to do the color line art, so I already knew how I wanted all the colors to be laid out, so it made it easier to be able to pick out all the colors that I was using beforehand and then just start working on one area, rendering it out before moving on to the next. I would say this is more like dependent on what I'm doing. If I had something in mind, like usually if I do digital art, I'll do all my flats first and then start working on specific areas, or if I want all the lighting to be in a similar undertone, I'll do that across the full thing. In this case, I just rendered out each section as I felt like it and would pick what I thought would be enjoyable to work on at the time. I will usually start with the faces because I feel like if you screw up on the face, then you can start over easier than rendering out everything and then the face. And so yeah, that's just what I like to do. So a lot of what I tend to do is a lot of back and forth with my first two colors to get a very smooth transition, and then with my other shadows I will then go back in with more of a cell shading kind of method to kind of define some of the lines a bit more. I feel like it gives it like a nice like smooth transition to different like depths of shadows, and then like a defined shadow line. Those are always fun. Now for the wings, a lot of it was blocking out the colors, taking in the next shadow, and then blending that back out so I could still get that softness till I went back over with a darker color to add in my shading, and this way I could get the effect that I was looking for, and then I would just tweak it here and there depending on what I felt needed more contrast. Now for the wings, I didn't want the wings to just be a solid white, so I wanted to tint them a little bit pink, but I didn't want them to be so close to the dress, and so I went in with a very light like peachy pink color and then used the shadows to enforce the pink a little bit more, and so that way they kind of popped off of the paper. I didn't really want it to just be white shaded with like reddish grays, so I figured more pink couldn't hurt it. Man, these wings were really just back and forth with the first two markers before I even got close to doing anything else. As I've been watching some of my videos when I've been editing them, I didn't realize just how much I hop around. Like, I still work in like a continuous area as far as like what patch that I'm rendering, but I'll just like pick a spot and then jump to another spot. And I knew I did that, but I didn't realize to the extent that it happens. It's always interesting to see, right? Now, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I am notoriously bad at remembering when holidays are. The only reason I even remembered Valentine's Day was going on was because I was doing little decorations for this Halloween skull that I have at my job, and I wanted to put little heart eyes in it, and then it kind of like stuck with me that the 14th was Valentine's Day. Other than that, the day would probably go by and I would have no clue, or I would find out on the day. Just not one of those things I pay attention to all that often. I don't know. I feel like it's different if they're holidays that you celebrate more often, but I think like the biggest holidays I would say is just like birthdays, which I guess aren't really holidays, but I don't know, just I can be oblivious to certain things, and I feel like that's just one of those things that I tend to be oblivious to. Now for the ribbon, I did something a little bit different. I ended up having one solid color down and then started layering the shadows on top. Objectively, I could have done it the other way. I thought it would just be easier than trying to go back and forth between all the different markers to blend them out. Overall, it ended up fine either way. Just different methods to doing different things. Now when it came to the dress, I knew I was going to be adding little hearts along the dress later, so I was trying to keep the design very simplistic because I was going to go back in with an accent highlight to really add a fun little pattern to it. So I just needed to get like the base rendering down, and then was messing around with the different shades of pink, and then did like a giant like light coat before I started going in with my darker colors, and then slowly blending that out to the consistency I wanted. Fun times, man. Fun times. Now for the deepest shadow of the pink, I did try to use that sparingly because I didn't want it to be so in your face, but I wanted to give it like more of a high contrast. So kept it as to like a minimum as possible, and then went back through and made sure that the rest of like the whites lined up to where it needed to be. Just overall kind of add that pop to it. Then here for the outfit having the little hearts on it, because how are you gonna have Cupid and not have more hearts adorning her? So I wanted that to be on her dress. I thought it would be a fun little detail. And then as I was doing that, I thought I could just add it to everything. So I did some for the tail end of her ribbons, and then added little dots around. Also used it for the highlights of her hair, just to kind of give it a fun little accent to it. And with that being said, I bid you guys adieu, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a lovely day, night, or whatever time you're watching this. Bye-bye.